Lynn Sr. returned home shortly after dropping his son at the McBride residence. Stepping out of the van, his eyes scanned over the yard, noting how clean it was. Last time Lynn saw his front lawn become such a clean state was before Lynn Jr. was born. By then, Lori and Lenny knew how to ride a bike. As it became clear they would continue to have more kids, the parents became very lax about their children leaving their toys in the yard as long as they knew where it was. There wouldn't be any problems. Now, just all about the girls' favorite hobbies had been locked up in the storage unit. Along with the clean lawn came an unending silence. Silence was just a regular school day. The Partridge knew that his daughters would be away until the afternoon. That was practically good for Lynn, since he didn't want to be bombarded with questions about Lincoln's session as soon as he walked through the door. Still, not a day went by and that Lynn didn't feel a little awkward coming home. Although the sisters had been more talkative lately, the father could tell that they weren't themselves. Why would they be? Everyone was still reeling after Lincoln's hospitalization and subsequent phobia after all. It's not like it was a problem that could easily be fixed. And to add on to the plate, each of the Louds' personal demon they hadn't mentioned to anyone until the sitting with the therapist showed up. A heavy sigh escaped from the Partridge as he shut the van door and walked to the house. What has my family become? He moaned to himself. Lynn opened the door to find his wife lying on the couch watching TV with a half-idled stare. Lily was on the floor chewing on a teething ring, and the mother made sure to keep within the peripheral vision in case the baby wandered off. Rita glanced away from the TV, noticing the door open. "Oh, hey, honey." She sat up. "How did it go?" He said it went interesting, but Lincoln didn't say much else about it. Lynn walked off to the couch, sitting next to his wife. "Guess our son has a lot to think about." Rita raised an eyebrow. "How was he this morning?" Nervous, unsure of how it will go. Lynn felt something tap his foot. Looking down, Charles lay down on his side and awaited to be pet. Rolling his eyes a little. The father used his foot to lightly rub the dog's little belly. When he came out, he looked a little better, I guess. You could say he was conflicted. He fell asleep on the way back and stayed like that until I dropped him off at the McBride house. Lynn leaned back on the seat. "Guess we'll have to wait and see what Lincoln will do." Then there was a pause between them. The show on the TV, filling the void temporarily. Rita looked back towards the TV while Lynn stared up at the ceiling. "Do you think we're doing the right thing, Rita?" The martyr shifted her focus back to him. "What do you mean? It hasn't felt like home since all this started. Sure, the girls were being more out and about after talking with Dr. Lopez, but I can tell that they're still tense and whatnot whenever I see them upstairs hallway. It was one thing to punish them for beating up Lincoln the way they did, but then to find out that all of our daughters have serious personal issues and that Lincoln was probably has more problems than being afraid of the girls." Lyndon rubbed the pinch of his nose bridge between his eyes. "I know we've talked about this before, but I still feel like this entirely our fault. You aren't the only one, Lynn. I still feel like I should have signed Lola into pageants 2 years ago. If I hadn't, she might have been a bit nicer. But then I wouldn't know the daughter I have now. And there's the fact that we always leave Lori in charge of everything when we're not around. We've done it so many times over the years, and thinking she can handle it, not knowing it actually was stressing her out. I don't want to have to do it, but we're going to have to work on these long hours so we can support all of our kids." Rita folded her arms. "I hate that we literally made Lori grow up faster than we intended to. And even worse, we've been out of the game for so long that proved that we're the next useless when it comes to kids arguing." Lynn nodded. "Given how we could barely keep Lana and Lola from fighting each other, we're practically dead beats when the girls came up with their own system. That brings me to another thing." He shifted his body so that he was facing Rita. "Do you think I should cut down on their punishments?" Rita then wrapped her fingers on the shoulder. I guess. I mean, the reason you gave back Lucy's poetry book was because it was an outlet for her depression. It's also because it was clear she was suffering from it. I just don't want the others to end up like her. I mean, when I think about it, it's possible that their hobbies are also ways to let out their frustration. The father started counting his fingers. Luna had music, Lynn had her sports or workout equipment. Lenny focuses on making a dress of stuff in the house to keep herself happy, sometimes. Lori always is on her phone when she needs to vent. Luann, he paused. I'm not sure if comedy is exactly an outlet, but given how she gets on April Fool's Day, I'm willing to say it is, and that's just the teens. So, it feels like we're punishing the girls twice as hard than necessary, Rita summarized, to which her husband then nodded. The blonde then pierced her lips and fought. On one hand, the girls fully deserved the punishments each sibling deserved. You couldn't get away with putting one of your own at the hospital, not expecting to receive your comeuppance. And that would be running a car off road and driving away, thinking no one would remember your car model or license plates. On the other, it was clear that since the very beginning that the gravity of the situation had taken its toll on the girls. Occasionally, the girls would find ways to hope things would get better, but almost each time their mood began to improve, that was feeling harshly ripped away from them due to an unforeseen revelation. Such is the case when discovering Lincoln's phobia, along with having their other hobbies denied to them. It was so quiet in the house that you could actually hear footsteps from the second floor from outside. It's like being in a ghost town, except the inhabitants were still there. Before leaving therapy, the girls were essentially husks to their former selves. Well, besides Lucy, she just got worse. No one said a word to each other outside the small chat. The girls even shed away a few shielded away from their parents, more than usual, not wanting to draw a tear. After having their own session with Miranda, Rita was also hoping the girls' grades hadn't been suffering due to their moods. The family had gotten better over the past week, but that depression was still there. As long as Lincoln remained fearful of his siblings, things would never go back to normal, if at all. We should all dial back some. Maybe even if that ever happens, will they ever return to them being themselves? I remember you said that Lola can't act like a princess anymore, on top of no longer attending the pageants. Apparently she was so angry at herself that she refuses to look at any mirrors. I had to help her get ready for school several times because she couldn't properly groom herself. Now Lola has gotten better since therapy, but sometimes I could just see her staring at the reflection, almost to the point where she wants to punch the mirror. Lynn frowned a bit, casting a side glance at the floor. I doubt anyone would be themselves until Lincoln comes home, honey. All we can do right now is try to ease the pain and hope for the best. A barking sound momentarily grabbed Rita's attention. Looking at the floor, she spotted Lily playing with Charles. Well, more like Lily was chasing after Charles, with an irate look on her face. Since the dog walked off with her TV toy, the infant babbled something too, not too. But of course, that was the much she was fiercely ran after him. The monarch crossed her eyes and took a deep breath. All right. She then looked back at Lynn. But we'll have to sit down with the girls to first talk about it. After you tell them about Lincoln's session, I wouldn't be surprised that all of them have been thinking about lately. Lily finally caught up to Charles, playing a game of tug-of-war with the dog with her toy. Unfortunately, Charles once again yanked it out of her grip before running up the stairs. Dang it, the infant uttered. Lori tapped her foot on the ground with her brows furrowed as a low growl escaped from her throat. She glanced down the street in both directions, her arms folding up in patience as she was beginning to wear thin. Where are they? She muttered to herself, wiping some sweat off of her forehead. The eldest Loud stood at the sidewalk next to the road by their school. Most of the students had already taken the bus, but a few lingered around just to meet up and chat with their friends over their weekend plans. The other two sisters stood alongside Lenny, who was fidgeting with anticipation, while Luna was keeping herself distracted with her MP3, her head bobbing every few seconds to the beat that blasted through the tiny earbuds. Normally they would have taken the bus or Vanzilla to school, but since Lynn Sr. needed it, and the parents wanted to pick them up from school, the trio stuck around waiting in the heat. Not only that, they were all aware of what was happening today, hence the reason why Lori was growing more steadily and more irritated as time went on. Is that them? Lenny asked with excitement. She spotted a family van coming. However, it was the wrong color. And to make. Wait, that's not Mom and Dad. She frowned as it passed, but soon became another family wagon approach. What about that one, Lori? The 16-year-old pointed out. Lori glanced to her left, giving an unamused look at the oncoming car. Lenny, Vanzilla is bigger than that. That's a station wagon. Lenny's finger curled back, her mouth curling down in disappointment, giving a small huff before she slapped her hand to her forehead. Lenny, that's a construction van. Did you take your pills today? Lenny stayed silent for a few moments. No, she smiled nervously. The eldest sibling gave a sigh before digging into her purse and taking out a water bottle. Then she reached into Lenny's lengthy hair and found her pill case. Lori handed her sister both objects, watching closely as Lenny popped one of the pills in her mouth. Lenny cringed a little as her tongue poked out in disgust, her taste buds detecting the foreign object before quickly washing it down. The 16-year-old blinked a few times as her pupils adjusted slightly. The pill's side effects were kicking in after a few moments. As much as I like to have to remind you to take your medicine, you really should stick a note in your head so you don't forget, Lenny. Lori spoke with a scolding tone. Sorry, Lenny put her pills back in his usual spot, shifting around until it sure was hooked onto her hair. If I could stay focused most of the day, I would, seriously. I totes know what Vanzilla looks like. You could still ask Mom and Dad to fill you out a stranger pill. Lori, we've already talked about this. I do know what kind of side effects I do get. Like, I don't want to wind up with zits, a rash, or even a stroke. Lenny rubbed her arm. It's already bad enough that I don't even know what it feels like to have a tan. Lori gave a sad gaze at her sister. She apologized to Lenny about the remark towards her skin earlier this week. It seems more than just a hot button that wasn't meant to be pressed. What about Lisa? Maybe then when we're no longer grounded, you could ask her. Lenny hummed a bit as she stared up at the sky. A list of past events came to mind, counting each one on their fingers. Even though she made the head the size of a beach ball, I still turned my skin blue. And she did try giving me some weird bloating cream afterwards, as an antidote. Never mind all the times that she made fun of my brain. Her brows furrowed as she stared back at Lori. Sometimes I wonder if she sees me just a toy to play with. She's only 4, dude, Luna started, making the blondes glance at her. Yeah, she's done a lot of weird stuff, but remember the doc said she may be smart, but she's still a kid. I know you're holding up onto those incidences, but if you can forgive Lori for making fun of your skin, you can't forgive Lisa? The musician stuck her hands behind her pockets. Heck, she forgave me for all the times I constantly interrupted her business with my tunes, which I made her accidentally blow up the room, including the one time I broke her glasses. I still forgive her for the time she used my axe for a test that broke into pieces. It's not like you have anything left to lose. Lenny's lips narrowed a bit. She gave a glance at the random object on the other side of the street, before glancing back up at the sisters. I don't, but what she said was mean. Luna shrugged. You can always let her know that, but you shouldn't hold on to grudges, sis. I'm pretty stumped that you two haven't talked over yet. The fashionista spotted a car that was coming up behind the musician, noting familiar dents and digs within their past driving episodes. Okay, I'm totes know that sure that's them. It better be, Lori groaned, twisting her head around. Thankfully, Lenny was right this time. Once the van pulled up, the girls hopped into the first 2 rows behind their parents. You know we could have taken the bus, Dad, the eldest blonde chided, laying out a small side as she was in some shade. She sat next to Lily, who was asleep in her car seat, while Luna took the seat next to her and Lenny was sitting in the second row. Yeah, I know, but I want to tell you all as soon as I could. Plus, I didn't want to risk you girls breaking down the door from asking too many questions. We don't do that all the time, Lenny replied, with a hint of annoyance. Right? Lori and Luna avoided eye contact, preferring to distract themselves with millennial things. So, how was school? Luna kept her attention focused on the passing scenery, resting her head on her hand. Terrible as always. I literally don't have much of a social circle to speak of, Mom. Rita raised an eyebrow before glancing back at her daughter. Wait, I thought you still had friends you could talk to. Not since I texted Bobby about what happened weeks ago, before I was barred from ever speaking with him. Lori stared at the floor, traces of sadness appearing in her eyes. Not that it would have mattered, because we broke up a while before Dad came back home that Sunday. Then, over the next few days, it got worse. Becky found out from Bobby, so did my other friends, and nearly everyone in the school. The only good thing is that my teachers at least are care enough to not let me derail the class. Lori paused, taking in shaky breaths as she was trying to keep herself from crying. Everywhere I go, someone is looking at me like I'm a creep or some murderer. Just last week, someone wrote bitch and a few other things I'd rather not say in my locker. My friends pretty much acted like I don't exist, or just afraid of being near me. Lenny took a sip of water bottle Lori gave her. I get the first part, but not the second part. Is that normal? You're always nice, sis. You aren't always angry. You're just being you. Lynn Sr. and Rita stole a glance at each other. Did anything happen with you, Luna? The father asked as she eyed his daughter at the rear view mirror. Yeah, the musician turned her head towards him. I got kicked out of my band. One of them said pretty nasty things to me. She looked back at the window, noticing that the combined grade school in the distance. Chunk still talks to me occasionally, though. Well, you seem to all taken it well, Lynn spoke out with a hopeful tone. Of course, that's when we pretty much stopped crying about it. During the first few days, I hid in the bathroom during my music class so I could be alone, Luna stated monotonously. Let's just say I had to visit the restroom several times to clean off my face, Lori added. I cut myself at one point, said Lenny, causing everyone to look at her in shock. The fashionist looked at them in confusion before seeing what she said. Well, it was just a paper cut during one of my classes, but I was a bit happy everyone was ignoring me for a while. Since you girls had these problems in school, why didn't you say anything earlier? The monarch asked, as the van pulled up to the stop at the outside of the K-8 school. Would it have made a difference? Lori stated. We pretty much deserved it after we got for the pain Lincoln went through right now. Nothing is going to change until he's back on his old self. And at this point, my partner with my words, I literally don't give a shit if the school hates me forever. I just want Lincoln to be back to his comic book loving self again. I certainly stopped giving a hoot after a week, Luna added, spotting her younger sisters coming. She unlocked the door. Lynn Sr. hummed, tapping a finger on the steering wheel. Luann opened the door, noticing a look on everyone's faces. Did we miss something? The three teens shook their heads, no. Luann shrugged and got to the second row, the younger girls occupying whatever seats they could. So, Dad, Lynn started, as she tried strapping her seatbelt on. The sporty loud knitted her brows as the darn thing refused to lock in. Did anything happen with Lincoln's therapy? Each of the girls were on edge as they waited for their father to answer. However, Lynn Sr. hesitated for a bit. He knew that his daughters were still waiting for a week to hear some good news to come out of this, having high hopes that Dr. Lopez would somehow cure their brother. However, therapy wasn't going to work that way. No, not that I know, that is. He could see hope beginning to drain from their faces. Lincoln didn't say much about after he was done. He fell asleep on the way back to the McBrides. At this point, I guess it's up to him, as far as whatever he wants to do. What if it doesn't do anything? Are we doomed to his internal redemption? Lucy asked, hugging her book. Now, girls, I'm pretty sure he'll do something. He was nervous about speaking with Dr. Lopez, and when he came out, he looked like he was mulling over his options. Who knows? He may send a text or something. Sure, he'll be happy to talk with the people nearby who beat him to death. Lola folded her arms. Excuse my sarcasm, but I doubt that will happen, Dad. Shouldn't we be the ones to call him in this case? Lana asked. I don't think you should, sweetie. That would probably just scare him, Rita replied. Lori developed a sullen look. Guess we're back to literally doing nothing then. Well, Lynn Sr. paused, waiting for the car to pass, before he could drive the van to the local college parking lot. I wouldn't say that. Luna paused her music and raised an eyebrow. What do you mean, pause? Well, Lisa then stood patiently. by the steps outside the main doors, her backpack slung over her shoulders, slightly uncomfortable position. Seeing Vanzilla, she waved at the car to catch their attention. The Pardutch pulled up to a stop in front of her. "Hello, everyone," Lisa greeted as she opened the door. Everyone else responded with the kind of look the genius shuffled alongside to reach to get to the back seats where Lucy and Lola were seated. "What I mean is, given how hard things have been for you girls since we've been first told about Lincoln's phobia, it felt like you guys were getting punished as twice as hard as I intentioned. I mean, one thing is, all of you guys' hobbies have been taken away, but losing all your friends and being hated for almost everyone at the school, not even the bullies I grew up with, having to deal with that." The girls looked at one another. It was obvious that they were rock bottom, but what was their dad going through with this? Was he going to lighten the load on the burden they share, or did he sign them up some activity that they were supposed to help them learn more? Me and your mother had talked about it. We decided to roll back some of your punishments. Now, that doesn't mean you get to do everything you used to. We will still allow you to do some of your respective hobbies. Tomorrow we can go to the storage place and pick your stuff out to take home with you. Lynn Sr. turned away his head slightly. "Does that sound okay?" The sisters were left speechless, their face having mixed with emotions. Lisa's wide-eyed when she apparently missed a heavy conversation. Lola and Lynn looked at the determining whether they should be somewhat relieved or not care much. Lenny and Luna had their mouths hanging open in surprise. Lori fumbled with her purse and stared at her phone, the only thing she was allowed to keep since the grounding. Before closing it, Luann and Lano had a tad different certain reasons. Lucy just raised an eyebrow. "I know it's probably shocking to you, but I realize that your hobbies could also be a ways to vent your frustration. By bearing you from them, it could cause a large amount of damage I doubt even Dr. Lopez could fix. We just don't want you girls to be permanently damaged from this emotional wise. We did end up doing what Dad to Lucy and..." Rita paused, unable to figure out the right words. "I know I have forgiven you guys the Home Alone incident," Lucy replied. "I know now you don't mean to do that on purpose, so I couldn't really hold it against you. I am still grateful you let me write again." The 8-year-old opened her book, flipping through a few pages. "I've been feeling it better now that I unleashed my inner turmoil to my poems." Luna pursed her lips together before speaking up. "That day we put Lil Bro in the clinic, I lost my will to make any songs, Pops." She gripped her MP3 player with both hands and stared out the window. "Yet I still had the itch to song about how crappy our lives have been. I wanted to write something for Lincoln to send to him, even though it may be pointless now. Well, one thing for certain is I'm definitely off pageants forever." Lola folded her arms as she sank to her seat, putting a hand on her forehead. "I can't even bear to show myself in public after what I did." "Doesn't school count as public?" Lana asked. The younger twin glared at her the opposite. "Not now, Lana. And I can't play sports for two reasons. One, I lost the will to do them anymore. And two, I doubt I'll be let on any of my teams since most of my sports fans know about what happened," Lynn added. "And I can't figure out what's funny or our current standing. If I tried doing funny business right now, I'd run my reputation to the ground. More than it already has," Luann pointed out. "You don't have to be in pageants anymore, sweetie. And you don't have to do sports if you don't want to, Lynn. But it would still help if you have some kind of outlet. I mean, you might find something creative to do, Lola. You could set up your punching bag hammer in it, Lynn. Dad always did that whenever you were frustrated." The sporty lad sighed through her nostrils. "I guess I'll think about it," was Lola's response. "You could do the same, Luann. Sorry to remind you about it, but your pranks on April Fool's Day are very creative," Lynn Sr. added, hoping to stir something in his comedian of a daughter. Luann gave a low shrug and opted to follow Luna's example and stare at the passing scenery. "While I do find the idea of re-questioning my chemistry set as a way to channel my own inner feelings, I thought it would be great use to the college, so I'm more than inclined to take some time away from science to spend with my family." Lisa finally broke out what seemed to be spoke out of something that no one else would say anything. The Partridge scanned each of his daughters in the rearview mirror. They were closely the sad and indifferent aspect of having means to ease their pain. That went over smoothly, he groaned in awkwardly. Lynn Sr. glanced at his watch, noting that it was close to 4. Well, I don't feel like cooking anything, and I doubt pizza would be an option right now, he muttered to himself. How does everyone feel about eating out today? A chorus of meh approval answered. It wasn't anything they could do. At the McBride's residence, Lincoln was on the couch trying to read one of his comics for the last hour. Keyword tired. After his dad had dropped him off, the boy used a spare key to get inside. The Louds knew that he was going to be alone for a while. Howard and Harold would be at work until 5, and it would make them at least an hour to get home. As for Clyde, Lincoln glanced at the clock. It was a little after 2, so he should be home soon. Along with whatever homework they may have to do this weekend, occasionally Cleopatra and the new kitten the McBrides had recently adopted would cuddle up to him every few moments at the time. It was mostly out of curiosity wherever they go doing whatever cats do. To try and ease the troubled mind, Lincoln hoped some Ace Savvy would distract him for a while. This didn't last very long because he would wound up reading the same page for 17 minutes after 3 whole weeks. He was dead set on avoiding his sisters as much as possible. Now it felt like two sides of his brain were warring with each other. The Loud came to trust Dr. Lopez after the first meeting, but following the said advice proving to be difficult. Of course, Lincoln would still have to be hesitant to be somewhere near his sisters. If they weren't going to kill him, they would still try to find some sort of bodily harm. But every time his fearful self had brought up, he was constantly reminded of what Luann did for him yesterday. Giving a frustrated sigh, Lincoln sat up, placing the comic down on the armset. He bit his lip, drumming his fingers on the seat that reflected over everything new at the moment. I've been hiding from my sisters for weeks, and nothing has happened to me. Well, aside from the occasional nightmare, Lincoln thought to himself as he glanced around the room. I have thought about that at school would be a death trap, and I was really certain it was. His fingers gripped at the edge of the seat. Lola was out there somewhere, and Lucy could have been in dark places. I stayed away from any garbage cans in case Lana was near, and thankfully my arm prevented me from taking gym classes. Lincoln glanced at his arm cast. I had no idea where Luann was until I bumped into her. Even then, she didn't do anything to hurt me. Lincoln looked towards the kitchen, spotting the main house phone nestled on the cradle of the wall. None of them had tried calling me since I got my phone a week ago. Do they actually know I'm afraid of them? A small shiver went down Lincoln's spine. He gripped his shoulder with his good arm for comfort as he glanced at the floor. They could be doing that just to scare me. The Loud looked back at the phone. But Dad and Miss Lopez and I needed to be more open-minded. Lincoln stared at the phone for what seemed like hours before he finally got the courage to get it off the couch. The 11-year-old shuffled his way to the phone, mixed opinions contributing with the direct past actions. Lincoln reached for his phone, his hand stopping a few inches from the receiver. His fingers curled inward as he began to doubtfully vaguely of what appears to be about to do. Before dealing with the sister fight protocol, hearing the voices of 9 of his sisters would range from happiness to irritation. Since then, it might have been while death calling them to claim their soul. However, before there was a significant difference between past incidents and now. Back then, Lincoln didn't have any sort of barrier to protect him from the potential thrashing. His sisters would only be a few steps away, or somewhere within the same building, ready to sneak up on him if needed. Even though his friends vowed to protect him, Lincoln was very confident in their plan, especially since he considered how aggressive the siblings were when how things didn't go their way. With the phone, he had a distance at best, and the girls could only verbally assault him. It's not like they would attack me for the phone, right? Lincoln told himself as he had the receiver out of the cradle. The dial tone drowned as he waited for the command. Lincoln gingerly dialed his house number. Each button pressed increasingly anxiety. Drops of sweat followed down the side of the boy's head as it rang. He silently prayed that it would just go to voicemail, but as always, the universe seems to be sadistic. Hello? the female voice answered, the one that the loud boy was recognized too well. Lincoln's pupils shrank a little as his blood started to run cold. That voice was too young to be his mother, and it was very adolescent-like. Hello? Is anyone there? The voice sounded again. Lincoln stayed silent, and as hard as anything to hear, his breathing was starting to become uneven and labored, were only the sounds that the phone could pick up. Is this some kind of prank call? Lincoln could feel the venom in his sister's tone. Lincoln shut his eyes as he got the breathing under control. An audible gulp escaped from his throat as he tried to swallow his fear. Just when it seemed like the female loud was about to hang up, the middle child finally uttered two words, Hi, Lori. There was a loud noise on the other end of the line, as if the phone had been dropped. Lincoln could hear as if someone was quickly scrambling to answer, before it finally cleared up. Lincoln, is that really you? Lori's voice was hushed over, nearly trembling. Yes, the boy replied. So, how are you? Lori probably sounded like she didn't know what else to say, and Lincoln could hardly say much else. Never mind, that was a stupid question. Lincoln heard Lori give a heavy sigh. I know this probably isn't the best time to tell you this, but we're really sorry, Lincoln. We know you've been afraid of us since that day, and we just want something more than you to come home. We won't ever hurt you again. Lincoln gazed at the floor, unsure if he should trust Lori or just hung up in silence. He opened his mouth as if he were about to say something, but at that moment, another voice cut in. Yeah, we just want you to come home, Linky. Lenny? Just came home to us, bro. We'll take good care of you. Luna's pleading voice came in. We missed you, Lincoln. The twins joined in. I promise I won't wrestle with you anymore, bro. Len spoke up. Just come home, Lincoln. Lincoln started to sweat again. I don't think. Just come home, Lincoln. Just come home, Lincoln. All the girls started to say at the same time. Their voices become more distorted by the second. This little chorus repeated itself over and over, making Lincoln begin to quake on the spot. Suddenly he felt something poke his ear and the phone was on. Pulling the device away, the boy's eyes became the size of dinner plates, as his finger was sticking out the small holes of the receiver. Well, what the? Was all Lincoln could say, before the entire hand pushed off the top of the phone. Just come home, Lincoln. The line kept repeating that, and the hand grabbed Lincoln's arm. The middle child screamed as he threw the device on the side of the living room. The gesture was not well received, and almost immediately, 8 other hands sprouted from the phone, reaching towards their target. Lincoln screamed again before taking off towards the guest room. His momentum was immediately cut short as Luna and Lenny's hands grabbed his legs, dragging him back towards the device. Lincoln dug his nails into the carpet and slowed them down, but it was proving useless. The boy's heart was racing. He experienced something that was during school, where he was effectively cornered with no way out. This time, however, was inside the house with plenty of spaces to hide, and he wasn't about to make it easy for his sisters. Twisting around, Lincoln sat up and bit Luna's hand, before promptly clawing at Lenny's. They all immediately released him as the hands recoiled in pain, giving him the chance to run for it. The other hands reached out for him at lightning speed, chasing their prey throughout the wide hallway. Lincoln made a sharp turn to his bedroom and promptly slammed the door shut. The 11-year-old was pushed outwards towards a few feet as 8 hands slammed against the door. Lincoln looked several cautious steps back as the hands continued to pound and claw at the wooden barrier that separated them. He bit his lip in an attempt to hold back his scream when he noticed that the door was cracking inwards. It wouldn't hold for long. The middle child looked towards the window. He could try climbing out of it, but he doubted he would get to the window in time. Glancing towards his bed, there was a choice of hiding there. Lincoln shook his head. That would too be obvious. That would sure get him caught. Looking over near the door, there was a bedroom closet. Lincoln gripped his hair, twisting his head, and so as he weighed his options, he didn't have much time to think of it either, as the door was starting to splinter. Finally deciding on what to do, Lincoln sucked in a breath through his teeth. He made a beeline for the closet. He shut the door as quietly as he could, hoping the sounds of the girls hammering would drown out. Seconds after he sealed himself in the closet, he could barely hear the door to the bedroom finally give way. Lincoln put his hand over his mouth in an attempt to quiet his screams. The closet was filled with the sounds of shaky breaths and hurt things being rummaged around the bedroom, including one or two of the beings being overturned. Quiet screams, but of course then, the door to the knob started to jiggle. The color then drained from Lincoln's face as he fought hard not to yell in panic. He looked up at his clothes that hung up themselves. Being quick thinker he was, Lincoln stretched his arms out several times, pulling the clothes down to haphazard manner. The 11-year-old lied down, arranging the clothing to make it look like they appeared to be lying on the floor for a while. His body was covered. Lincoln placed a few shirts over his head before lying flat. His body came deathly still once he heard the door. The loud boy held his breath as his sister's hand searched through the closet, picking up various pieces of clothing and moving to hang the clothes in the search of its prey. Lincoln took a sharp breath once before he held his head to move onto the pile. It trailed along the pile, pressing down on certain spots to see if anything was under it. Lincoln's eyes began to water as he felt the hand touch a couple shirts that lay over his head. He shut his eyes and let out a small whimper as he waited for the inevitable to happen. Just then, when it seemed like Lincoln was found, a sudden buzzing sound forced his eyes open. He looked around. The boy felt himself back on the couch, still looking in the general direction of the house phone. Lincoln blinked a few times. Did I just have a daydream? The buzzing occurred again, making Lincoln jump for the second. He realized that it was coming from the pocket. He fished out his phone. Upon seeing the caller ID, the white-haired boy child calmed down a little. Lincoln pressed a button and put the phone to his ear. Clyde? Hey, Lincoln, can you open the door? I can't find the spare house key. Clyde said as he scratched his head. The doormat was overturned, and the nerdy kid was currently looking for it under the rocks of the garden. Lincoln glanced at the small table to his right, seeing the house key lying there. Yeah, sorry about that, he replied as he got up. He sat on the phone with the table before heading to the door. Clyde was still looking around the front porch when he had heard the door open. So how was your... Clyde paused upon seeing the pink tint in Lincoln's eyes. Were you crying again, Lincoln? Lincoln felt his cheeks, noting that they felt a little damp, and he gave a small frown. Yeah. Clyde then stepped through the doorway, shutting behind him. Did you have another nightmare? More like a daymare. You wanted to talk about it? The African-American sat on the big chair in the kitchen.